This show is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. You are your greatest asset. It's time you started investing in that. Visit betterhelp.com/allies and take care of you.
Hello and welcome to the Easy Allies podcast. There is no Brandon Jones this week. On top of having jury duty, he's actually sick. So I'll be your host, Daniel Bloodworth, trying to cobble something together here.
Dude, blood stepping up. Respect.
Yeah. Today I'm joined by Michael Damiani.
How's it going?
Ben Moore.
Konnichiwa.
And in the booth, Isla Hink.
Hi.
So today we are here to discuss some of the biggest headlines in video games this week. But before we do that, we're not answering for anything.
Yeah, I like this podcast. New era.
The new era. Attitude Era Easy A podcast.
Yeah, basically we're starting this after we should have left to go home. So there was not time to go through and find corrections. Brandon will probably pile those on top next week, along with everything else. But to get started, we'll start with something that we were all here early this morning for, and that was EA Play Live. And in the past few years, EA has kind of distanced itself from E3 physically.
Yeah.
This year, they distanced themselves by being a month later. What was your guys' first of all, general vibe of how the show went?
I mean, it was better than I thought it would be, just because of how historically bad they've been the last few years that they've done this type of thing.
Yeah.
I felt it was a very tight presentation. They didn't show off too much. What they showed off, they showed enough of to answer most of my questions. And what they showed off was pretty actually interesting. And I think, worth our time, worthy of an event, basically. Not something like what Capcom did where, hey, we told you it was going to be in here and you're still disappointed. It's like, that wasn't even worthy of an E3 event. This could have been in E3 and just been one of the better conferences or, showcases.
Blood, you and I were kind of talking about it, but just for the sake of context, like a big problem with EA is they really don't understand, the audience. Sometimes it feels like the E3 audience, if we're kind of branding this in E3, where the way they would present themselves was not really catered to kind of that core gaming demographic in a way that was interesting or engaging. But this was very snappy for the most part, or at least in what I remember old EA conferences feeling like. Even things that I wasn't interested in, I don't feel like we were spending that long on them. And then things that I was interested in, I felt like we kind of got to the heart of it right away, where it was like Battlefield Portal is a great example. I think it's a really cool idea, and after having a pretty entertaining reveal trailer, they're like, this is what this is. This is a top-level view of what this is, what you're going to be able to do, and what we're going to include in it. And so, I thought the presentation was strong. I think at least in the realm of EA. Dead Space obviously pulling a lot of weight there, but no, I think they've definitely gotten better at presentations, if this is anything to go by.
Yeah, I think we lost a lot of that, executive speak.
Yeah.
They were one of the ones that kind of kept that going for the longest and just had people kind of talking on stage.
Yeah.
I remember one time a couple of years ago, they were just all proud of themselves for bouncing between LA and London and just all of that kind of conversation. And then the other, big criticism that we've had of EA in the past few years is there'd be times where they would quote unquote show a game, but all you're really seeing is concept art or renders and it doesn't really help you feel
Those
any
dev
value
studio
for
trailers,
that, right?
Yeah. It's funny they mentioned that because I think I think it was in the pre-show we kind of got a taste of that where they cut back to previous things that they had done.
Yeah.
And there was that EA Play where they were all outside, and it was just every conversation was the most awkward thing you've ever seen. And there was definitely some awkwardness here, but I think not being forced to endure those really forced, really tired conversations where you don't get a lot of information, like having a lot of that cut out was helpful. I think Austin was a good host as well. I think he was able to bring the energy without making it too awkward as well. So I think that helped. And the other thing that I want to say, like on a big level, is I feel like in the AAA space, right, and EA is as AAA as it gets, we've spent a lot of years them taking series that we care about and giving us things that we don't want. And that didn't happen here. Like, I was like, no, I really want Battlefield Portal. Like, that sounds like a cool idea. Like, you're not wedging in this thing that doesn't
not like
belong.
Hardline, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah. It's like you're including something that feels like it makes sense, that is honoring the series history, and, like, just looks like goofy fun in a way that is super appropriate to the sandbox of Battlefield. So I'm way into that.
Yeah, I think, to me, the weakest points are, the pre-show, which I kind of have had a bit of a rant on. Like, I don't think official pre-shows make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because, especially with this, where the pre-show started at what seemed to be what I understood should be the show's start time, rather than happening before that.
Right.
So they had a countdown for like 5 minutes, and then pre-show starts, and they have a countdown for 15 more minutes. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. We're watching all of these trailers that have been previously released and recapping because they've had several different streams for, more specialty things like EA Originals over the past few weeks.
I agree with you that the pre-show was a low point, but I'm sure it probably wasn't intentional, but the pre-show actually like kind of got me in the headspace of like, oh, this is what it's going to be like. And it kind of like set my expectations at a very low level. And so the actual show was better than that.
Right.
So in comparison, I have a more favorable companion, which is a really interesting strategy, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if they intended it that way, but maybe someone was a genius over there. It was like
that's some pretty next level stuff.
We know a way to make this be received better. I think obviously they're taking steps to improve. They're not going to get it all right in one attempt here. So maybe the feedback will be to them that tighter is better. Like a state of play, Nintendo Directs, they basically cut out all that excess stuff and just focus on the announcements they get to what they need to get to. They're out. I think it's just like maybe a byproduct of an older era where you feel like it's a tentpole event. You got to have a pre-show. You got to entertain the guest ahead of time. You got to do something afterwards, and like that, people want to get on. Their time's valuable, and they just want to get on. And like, it's just a different era now.
Yeah. And the other bit that I thought was somewhat of a low point was the intro with Lost in Random. Which I think they kind of knew. I think they kind of went in there going like, yeah, this is going to be a bit silly, but having the narrator do this back and forth with the host.
I think, you're totally right that it was a little eye-rolling, but I think that game looks so charming that it kind of got washed away just because I'm like, oh, I really want to play that. It does look really unique, really creative, really fun. And so I think that's what I ended up walking away from with.
Yeah, that's a good point. I felt that way too. Like I forgot about it. It's like, they tried, but at the same time, I think it's also a thing they might learn from. Is like you totally didn't even need that. Yeah. You could have gone right into that game, and it like that's what mattered. That's what people are remembering about it because let the game speak for itself.
And the one, oh sorry,
no, you're good.
The one thing I would say too, and you touched on this earlier, Ben, is that every time that they had one of those interviews where Xavier was talking to a developer, it felt worthwhile. It felt like I was learning something that mattered to me, that mattered to the game, and that I wasn't just getting some PR bullet points. I was talking to somebody who was actually working on that game and passionate on that game.
Totally. That was actually something that I wanted to touch on. One of my absolute biggest pet peeves with award shows that they never seem to learn from, except like I think this is a good case where they did, is like you get the really drawn out, like beating the horse to death, like, oh, I love video games. I'm so excited that I get to work on this video game. I've been playing Mario since the 80s. And it's just like, no, like that's not, you don't, no one's going to believe you. Like, the way that you convince people and the way you get people excited is you show them what you're working on. Like, if you show me something that is awesome, I'll believe that you're excited to work on it. I'll see that passion, right? I think Lost in Random is a good example. Just like seeing that game in action, I'm like, I bet that was really fun to work on. And that's just so much more effective than the tired, like, oh, man, I love Star Wars. Like that stuff is meaningless.
So out of these, I think obviously Dead Space is the biggest news piece.
Yeah.
The thing we're most excited about.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of got enough hints to narrow in on Dead Space. And like in my mind, I'm trying to figure out like how did we really figure this out? But I think part of it is that so many people had said they weren't going to be there, right? Skate wasn't going to be there,
mm-hmm.
and BioWare wasn't going to be there, and Star Wars said they weren't going to be there. But what is it? What do you think that like made us, other than just the will of Dead Space, that made us arrive at that before the real announcement?
There was a moment in the stream because it's kind of awful, but it's like one of those weird things where it's so awful that I love it, and it kind of is funny and fun to like just interact with you guys about. The letter thing is so goddamn dumb, and it's like beautiful at its stupidity. But when we got to like ITSBA, I was like, oh, it's back. I was like, the only thing that is going to be is Dead Space. And so I was pretty convinced well before we actually got to the Dead Space reveal that like, yeah, not only are they bringing Dead Space back, but it'll be here.
Yeah. I mean, we had industry insiders also saying it was
Right.
pretty much going to be it.
Right.
I mean, we were still unsure about whether it was going to be Dead Space 1. I mean, most of the evidence or circumstantial evidence seemed to point towards it was going to be Dead Space 1. But we all just wanted to see what it looked like. We wanted the confirmations from Motive or EA themselves. And, from the press release, we saw, some of the details that, like, it's the story of one, but elements from all the different games. So
right.
Whatever that's really going to be, we've yet to see. But yeah, this is one of those, I think it's usually safe whenever it comes like Activision, Ubisoft, or EA. Insider leaks seem to always be pretty accurate when it comes to those three companies for some reason. So I was like, yeah, these ones are usually pretty spot on. So like this has been like weeks old, like, kind of like worst kept secret.
Does Dead Space need a full remake rather than what they did for Mass Effect?
I mean, whatever it takes to get it back. I mean, on a personal level, I can't even remember how much I played of the original Dead Space because I'm not like the biggest horror game fan.
Yeah.
But I know so many people love that game, and definitely watching a lot of people play it back at game trailers, like the atmosphere. I was like, okay, this seems pretty special. I feel like for me, my answer might not be what a lot of fans' answers would be, but it's basically, make this game, prove it can be successful again, and then you could go from there. I know a lot of people, I saw a lot of comments saying, man, I really wish they just make a new story. Wish they would have made like a new Dead Space. I don't want a remake. And it's like, you know what? There could have been nothing here. Like before all these rumors, like I don't think anyone ever thought Dead Space was ever coming back again. Like it was probably like, good luck getting this to come back. So it starts somewhere. Same thing with like the Resident Evil remakes. Like that series is kind of, not in a great spot. And you got RE2 remake, RE3 remake, and it's like you got RE7 in the middle of that, and Village. So it's like, who says that this doesn't like blow up and they make a new Dead Space and it goes the same route? A lot of those rumors were saying this is mirroring what Capcom did with Resident Evil. EA saw that and was like, let's do this with the Dead Space.
7 was before 2. So
okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Dead Space is an incredible game. Dead Space 1 and 2 are incredible games, and it absolutely deserves all the love and care in the world. But it's interesting that you compare it to Mass Effect, because when you have a conversation about Mass Effect with somebody, you're not like, let me tell you about this gunfight. Like that's not how you open it up. You're like, oh man, like I fell in love with Tali or like Garrus or whoever, and it's like, oh, do you remember that one crazy story event, right? And so I think not that the gameplay isn't important. That's not what I'm trying to say. Not that the gameplay isn't important in Mass Effect, or that there are a bunch of other elements going on. But I think it really comes down to the writing and going through that journey, that trilogy, and having that be the experience. And so I think, largely keeping that intact, you still get that. But with Dead Space, the story is incredibly important, but it's about atmosphere. It's a game that is dealing with unstable characters doing unstable things. It's sort of like an unreliable narrator, leading you along. And so I think if you play it straight, a lot of the joy is gone. I think with horror, it's the unknown, and I think kind of wrapping it back around to Resident Evil 2 Remake. Like, yes, the general framework of the story and the characters were there, but even if you played Resident Evil 2 100 times, you didn't know what was going to happen in Remake.
Right.
They made it a new experience, and I think that is exactly what they needed to do here, or they need to do here.
Yeah, so essentially it's to offset the familiarity, to play with your expectations and give you something that
you haven't
if you have if you have the game memorized,
right,
this is still going to have some value to you other than just higher performance and higher resolution.
Right.
I think the next big thing is Battlefield Portal, which is a mode in Battlefield 2042, which is essentially like allowing the community to mash up things from Bad Company, 1942, Battlefield 3, and 2042. So you have maps and weapons and vehicles, and you can arrange these things to where you have one tank versus 20 people, or 4 2042 soldiers versus 16 1942 soldiers. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like Mario Maker, except you're not designing levels. You're more like designing modes and in different kinds of setups and just these kind of versus elements.
Yeah.
And I think it came across in a way that probably appeals to people that aren't even into Battlefield usually.
Yeah, I think it appeals to people that aren't into Battlefield because it's so low stakes, right? Like when you're like in your reveal trailer when people have defibrillators and knives and they're just running in a field and like just mashing into each other, right? Like it's something where it's like you don't need any context. Like that's just fun. That's just dumb fun.
Yeah, it's like making custom games in Smash Brothers.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like custom games in Smash Brothers. It's like Forge and Halo. It's just something. And man, like thinking about it, that is something that we really lose a lot, I think, with AAA shooters. I think, honestly, it's part of the reason why I think I've been less invested in AAA shooters over the years is like everything is just so serious all the time, and everything is so hyper competitive in esports all the time. And like when I think of Battlefield and being obsessed with Battlefield and growing up with Battlefield, I loved it because you would do a match in 2042, or not in 2042, 1942, and you'd be like, I can't believe this idiot did that, and you just laugh about it. Or you'd be with your friends and you'd just be like, hey, let's try this. And you do something dumb and it'd be chaotic and be fun. And like even Battlefield 5, it was so serious. And this just feels like it's kind of tapping into the heart of the series, or at least what I feel is the heart of the series, like a little bit better.
Yeah, as someone who is like, I think I've only played Battlefield 1. It's the only one I ever actually played.
Yeah.
This, I got those same vibes pretty much. I was like, this is a series that I see other people play, and it's like these, oh crap, did you see that moment?
Yeah.
Like, can I do this? And now they're translating that into a kind of like a fan-driven like content, and you are so on point about like AAA shooters. I just keep hearing so much that like, they're too hyper focused.
Yeah.
They're taking away some of the fun element that was maybe like 10, even 15 years ago, that like this is what shooters or PC shooters and like, first person shooters were known for. And they're going back to that. And like, as you said as well, they illustrated the concept very brilliantly, I thought, because it was like so simple for anyone to understand. It just looked fun and goofy to play. And I really like it when companies just like let you, as long as it doesn't have to affect the main game, doesn't have to affect any kind of online rankings, just let people screw around with stuff.
Yeah.
And like some like sandbox mode, like here's all the stuff, just do what you want, create what you want to create and stuff. Obviously they said you're not going to be able to do map it or anything like that, but modes and setting the parameters, I think that's a good starting spot. And this seems like something they could build upon for a very, very long time. And that excitement, this was rumored that like this is a mode they were very excited about. Huber is going through the halls all the time telling us about like this thing is like going to be like their big thing. It's like it came across very well, especially with the developer interview part. It's like, okay, this is pretty legit.
When we just saw a brief glance of it in the trailer, but when they were showing like how you customize it, it looked pretty intimidating, at least to me. It didn't have like that. You mentioned Mario Maker, where it's like, oh, like this is clearly designed that like anybody can make a level. It didn't have that, but thinking about it, I don't know that is necessary. I don't think it needs to like appeal to everybody in a creation sense, because I think most people will just want to like play a bunch of goofy modes and like let the cream rise to the top, because the people that are going to be good at it will be able to figure it out no problem. And so like I want, like I think it's important that everybody is able to play a wide variety of things and get into the games that they want quickly. But in terms of the creation stuff, I don't know that like being the most accessible thing is all that important here. And again, I don't know. Maybe it is super intuitive and easy, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, just those brief snippets of interface. You saw some text boxes and you saw them like dragging and snapping things together, and it looks sort of like one of those logic puzzles. And like, I don't know. Is that going to be hard or not? But yeah, I am curious how well this all works with matchmaking. I wonder, will people, just go in and they'll just select the ones that are floating at the top, or will there be like, it would be actually kind of brilliant if there is just like a random button. You click and you don't know what you're going to get until like a rule sheet comes up on screen. Like, okay, I guess I'm going to be in a jet and I'm going to be trying to chase down this guy on a llama or something. I don't know.
I don't know what the success of Portal will be, but I'm certainly excited about it. It makes me think of like other modes and games that have kind of like consumed the game. Like I think about Call of Duty right now and just how overwhelmingly popular Warzone is. Or like I think about Warcraft 3 and how overwhelmingly popular, Dota became, that it just kind of spun off into its own thing. And like as a company, when you have runaway successes like that and you're making the next game, it's like, okay, do we just want to focus on this thing and make it even better? Or do we want to just kind of try something new? It's like, I just wonder how you deal with those things that blow up and like what is going to happen with this new iteration of Battlefield and which mode is really going to stick. Are any of them going to stick? Like, how is Portal going to fit into all of that? And like, how does that shape the future of Battlefield?
Right. I think to me, it's positioned in a way that it's almost like hedging their bets, right? Because it could just be a part of this game. And if it does all right, then, they can continue and include that as a feature in the next game and then, potentially bolt something else on after that. But at the same time, because it's got its own branding, it almost feels like you're getting 3 separate games with 2042.
Right.
And so if this thing just really takes off and they really need a lot of resources and they think they can get a broader market for it than the people that want to buy 2042, then they could just, okay, we'll cut it out and we'll make it a bigger thing and you can get it on its own.
Yeah.
And you don't have to buy Battlefield 2042 to play it.
Because I think the key is, and this is what Battle Royales have figured out, right, is this seasonal content Battle Pass style where it's kind of just easy to bolt onto it forever, where it's like, okay, here's this season's cosmetics and just kind of do that over and over and over again. Battlefield Portal has the same sort of potential, but it's just not copy and pasting every other success, right? Where it's like, you can there are other Battlefield games that you can include things from. Like maybe as time goes on, you'll be able to manipulate the maps more, add more maps, where it's like, I feel like it's kind of primed for that regular injection of content, but in a way that feels different and like is maybe a little bit more exciting than what we're used to seeing with a lot of monetization stuff. Like even from Battlefield itself, I guess.
And some other things that looked really good in there. Lost in a Random, we saw
Yeah.
the battle system a bit. I think I still want to get some hands-on to really be able to explain it, but it looks like they've got a mix of real-time and turn-based and card things in there. They also gave some updates on Apex Legends and Knockout City. But what they led with, which is something that I think is important for the company, the bottom line is showing off Codemasters, who they spent a lot of money to acquire. And I think it was the pre-show where they showed off the F1 story mode, which that just came out last week. And then they kind of gave an overview of Codemasters' legacy in the more recent games that they've worked on. And then they announced Grid Legends, which is coming from the central Codemasters studio. And with that, they're also doing a story mode with live action.
Blood, I have never played a grid game in my life. But there's a scene where he just pushes the guy on the shoulders, and it's clearly the most staged thing. It looks like you're watching a wrestling match, and I'm like, I want to experience this. It got me excited about a grid game in a way I never have been before. But you made a really, really good point. It was actually probably my favorite comment during our reactions, where they're like, okay, for this story, we're going to tell you're going to be the underdog. And you're like, that is every racing story that has ever existed. It's just the one racing story. And it's like, yeah. As excited as I am for the live action stuff, it's like you already know beat for beat probably how this is going to play out.
It's so funny how that's so true.
Yeah.
Because even stories where it's the veteran who's won a lot and stuff. Something will happen where they're now the under. It's
I gotta climb back up.
For story, I was oh wait, yeah, this is. It's how else are you gonna do this? But to your point, Bloodworth, I think it was very important to showcase what they intended to do with Codemasters and showing their future, what they're going to be working on, because that was a very big get for them. And there were questions about, obviously they're probably going to be working on some kind of racing franchise, and what are they going to be doing, and how, and we all know how EA works. You're coming into the EA family, you're going to be making games, you're going to be expected to make a lot of money. And I'll agree with you, Ben. The premise, it's interesting how they're going for these angles to get people who might not be so interested in racing games to maybe pay attention to this and give it a chance.
Right.
So yeah, it looks goofy. I had misunderstood it first because I thought it was an interview.
I thought that's
right.
That's exactly what I thought.
Because I'm not familiar enough with the sport, and I'm like, but then I was like, is this real, or is this yeah? I was like, the fight. I'm like, no, not so much, is it? It's stage, and then you're it's actors. Oh, okay, I get it now. Yeah, it's as long as they can make it pretty accessible in terms of the gameplay, so they could keep advancing a story. It's that might be all people want, is some kind of story campaign out of a racing game. They don't care about everything else that it has to offer, but just brings in more people.
Yeah, and it's interesting as an acquisition too, because Codemasters at this point essentially has at least 4 studios, because they've got the studio that's doing F1, and then they've got the main studio, which is Grid Legends, and then they have the one that used to be the Drive Club's devs, Evolution, that did Dirt 5. And then they've also recently acquired Slightly Mad Studios with Project Cars, which ironically, they did Need for Speed games in the past before Project Cars. They did the Need for Speed Shift games. So will they go back to Need for Speed at some point?
I imagine it company meetings. That has to be a way that you break the ice between studios, where it's so which Need for Speed game did you work on or have been involved in or something? I just feel like Need for Speed has just passed through so many hands that, yeah.
So, but so it'll be interesting to see what that team has up next on their plate, as well as the Evo team.
Another thing is that's kind of interesting about this Codemasters acquisition is it is super big for EA, as you said, Damiani, but this also helps their EA Play Pro or whatever it is on PC, and Game Pass Ultimate as well.
Origin,
that's a very significant number of series that are just kind of sucked into that.
These acquisitions are starting to be about catalogs as much as like what they can bring to the table for future developments. Is everyone's very makes very much sense. Yeah.
Next up, we've got a bit of a doozy in terms of the details. I think we're going to be talking more about reactions than details because there's so much of this just in the air. But the state of California essentially is raising a lawsuit against Activision Blizzard, essentially talking about inequities in the workplace with women and harassment and just kind of a hostile environment and not having equal pay and not being able to get promotions and not having more women on staff. And there's a lot of different angles and stories and things out there, and it's just a huge mess, essentially. Trying to sort it out as well as just obviously what's been going on there behind the scenes.
Yeah, when you read through it, there's a number of like specific allegations that sort of range in severity, and at the more like extreme level, you read some of the things, and it's just absolutely horrifying. And you have the very natural question of like how could this even possibly happen? Like how could you not only do this but exhibit this type of behavior for years and just completely get away with it? And obviously that's a common thing that we've seen, recently, especially with Ubisoft. And I know it's a corporate problem all around. It's not just Blizzard, but it doesn't make it any less horrible.
Yeah. It shows that no matter how much progress we think we've really made, that like the stuff is still going on and that it's happening at the biggest companies, and it still seems to be pretty widespread throughout the industry, despite people thinking it's getting better. It's obviously things like this. It's like, well, if we're getting better, some of these more extreme stuff wouldn't be happening, right? Like that stuff should have been happening like 10, 15 years ago when like these movements started to begin to kind of call out these people. And it's like, I feel like maybe some people aren't really learning. They're just saying what you want to hear and hoping they get a pass sometimes.
They just desperately want it to go away.
A little bit with Ubisoft. That's been some of the newer accusations with Ubisoft, is that like nothing's changed over there. I mean, and it's in different ways that this has been happening. I know this might not be in your notes, but while we're getting ready for this, Insomniac Games, about Ratchet and Clank, about how the female Wombat, one of the now departed developers, was saying how they had to fight to like not make her have like wider hips, like bigger breasts, stuff like that, to like get the look that they have for her now. And it's like even like stuff like that is kind of still going on, and it's like as respected as some of these developers are and as great of games they make, it's like everyone has blind spots, and it's like I guess people still need to be calling it out to remind everyone, because otherwise they won't learn. But also at the same time, there are definitely people who don't seem to be learning at all, even when they're being called out for it. So it's like a pretty widespread problem.
And an important thing to point out is it's not like this is, and not that allegations shouldn't be seriously considered in multiple contexts, but this isn't somebody just angrily posting on Twitter, right? Like this isn't. This is the state of California being like, "We're coming for your ass," and so I think that gives it kind of a level of credibility and seriousness where it's like, "Holy cow!" Like this. There's going to be a reckoning here, or you hope there's going to be a reckoning. Yeah,
I think there's still some questions as to like how like when it gets on this level of like a state versus a gigantic corporation, it becomes like, what is actually happening here? Because they say this is a result of 2 years of investigation in which apparently behind the scenes they've already been talking to the company, but Activision Blizzard fired back with this just like really offended
I really want to talk about their response, because that's like that's one of the worst parts about this whole thing. Because their response was like you just read it and you felt like you needed to take a shower, because it starts out where they're like, harassment shouldn't happen in any industry, but then they're like, fuck you guys, we really care about diversity and like statements are good, and it's this type of behavior that's forcing companies in California, and it just felt
when they're talking about them like pushing people out of the state and stuff. This doesn't have a place in the statement.
It was basically just using very PR speak. But when you like kind of filtered through that, it just felt like a child that got reprimanded, where their first instinct was like, but we've done good things too, and fuck you guys. Like it felt very like immature and insecure, to the point where it almost like lended believability to the accusations. Like they, as much as they possibly could in this PR speak, sounded wounded or sounded like angry. Like this was really getting to them. There was nothing about their tone that made you think like, oh, okay, like maybe there is something going on here. Like I think it, in my eyes, hurt their image more than it helped them.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's important too to say a few of the examples of what was cited in at least what I was reading, like, because it's not just, like people getting paid less or pass over for, or like run-of-the-mill harassment. It's like crazy. It's like systemic insanity. Like the one that I heard, I mean, like there was circulating nudes of one woman that worked there. Like, there was a thing called...
It's important to contextualize that, because that's really like the key example.
Yeah.
It's not just passing around nudes. It
Right.
was at a company party,
Right.
passing around nude photos of this woman's vagina who ended up killing herself.
Right.
Right.
Like it gets... Yeah.
That's
It's
the
terrible.
level of like awful that we're dealing with.
And
here.
like the other one that really shocked me was the cube crawls, where like apparently men would crawl drunkenly through the office, through cubicles, like, and under women's cubicles and shit. It's just like, why is this even tolerated at all?
That one
like,
was kind of frustratingly vague.
Yeah, it was
like,
weird.
Yeah, like it definitely seemed weird, but they were just like, people got really drunk and crawled through cubicles, and like naturally your brain is like, oh, I could see like so many ways that could lead to, a lot of like obvious situations, but they didn't quite go that far in specifying that. Like you assume that, but they just said people got really drunk and crawled through cubicles.
Yeah, like the frat boy culture that Bloomberg said, it fits.
Joking about rape,
it's insane.
Yeah, in front of women and stuff. It's just
just like
and
overt. Yeah,
it's important not to be sanctimonious about this, because like there are cases where like I've told jokes and I'm like, ah, man, I shouldn't have said that, or like sometimes things go wrong. It's not about like individual instances like that. It's about like an institutionalized and systemic like culture and environment that becomes abusive to the point where like people are becoming suicidal.
Yeah.
Like I think it's like the broad picture that is really worth focusing on here and trying to address.
Well, and I liked what you said before, Ben, about how like we know about Ubisoft and we know about Activision, but like, fuck, is this all of them at this? Because Riot had it too. Like, is it just everywhere? Is it endemic to the whole industry? And like at this point, it seems like shit. It must be. Like, besides little indies, some of which have had reports as well. Yeah. Like some pretty bad ones. Like, is it just because like a lot of these people who get fired then go and start their own thing too. So it's just like, what's the deal? It's systemic for sure. And
I think a big reason. Obviously this is super worth talking about on its own, but it's kind of disgusting. This is compounded by the fact that the last 2 years, we haven't had a lot of positive things to say about Blizzard, both in terms of just the quality of their product and B, the stances that they're choosing to take or how they're choosing to represent themselves, right? Like we've spent a lot of time talking about the Blitzchung controversy with Hearthstone.
Yeah.
They had the whole Warcraft 3 Reforged debacle. It's just like, and then on top of that, you have this truly like mass exodus of key people from Blizzard that are just gone now. Like it's tons and tons of them, as well as Activision Blizzard doing massive layoffs for people. And it's like, this just sounds like hell. Like this just sounds like a living, like it's not just these awful, sexual harassment claims, this misogynistic culture. It's like, this just seems rotten to the core, and it's like coming out through the games, it feels like almost. And I was watching Asmongold, who is a very avid WoW streamer who's now streaming 14, and he had a really good point where he's like, even though you as the consumer are not responsible for these horrible things, like you kind of pay the price, right? Because when you have this type of culture, when you have this type of environment, it comes through in the games. Like the games are going to suffer. They're going to be less good than they could be because the people that are toiling to make them, and we know time and time again how hellish just making a game is, right? Like it's amazing that anything comes out at all with a lot of the stories that we've heard. Now imagine trying to make a game where like you don't know if you're going to be sexually harassed that day, and the kind of just like mental anguish that you're going through.
Or even worse, you're going to be sexually harassed that day.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you could do about it.
Right.
Like I was reading about the Skull and Bones thing, and just like the weird mismanagement of that leading to 8 years of development hell.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Okay, but like it's a similar story. It's a similar vibe to what you're saying, Ben. Is just like, what's going on? Where like the management of these companies, like, do they just cycle through and then junior members get promoted up who don't have the skill set to run a company or run a project, let alone like the emotional maturity to deal with situations like this or discipline their direct reports for the bad behavior? Like, I don't know. It's weird. They say too big to fail in that thing, and it's like all these companies kind of have that vibe where it's like there's no accountability, nothing changes because in the end, like, it's societally acceptable.
It's funny that you bring up the Ubisoft Singapore stuff, because reading through that, there's and it's not just this. You can find other examples of this as well. But in the Blizzard report, the Activision Blizzard report, and the Ubisoft Singapore report, you see like, hey, we went to HR and they're like, yeah, we can't do anything, or we're not going to do anything because they're too senior. And it's just like that, just trying to put yourself in that person's shoes and going to the department of your company whose sole job it is to fight to work through this stuff and just have them give you nothing. Like that has to be the most like debilitating, deflating experience. And it's like, how do you have any passion or drive to do what you're doing in a highly creative and competitive field if no one has your back?
When I think about that thing, what was it? I think it was at Defy, actually, where like that story came out about harassment, and then part of the story was like, yeah, this was reported to HR like a year ago, and no one did anything.
Right.
And it's like, without the weight of public shame, nothing changes, and no one ever does anything about it. And it's like, it's good that there's a lawsuit and that it's public and that examples are public, because now people are mad, right? Like Ubisoft, people got mad, and then Ubisoft did some kind of like hand wavy like apology, and like it cooled off, right? But like a lawsuit keeps that pressure on, and like maybe there will be something to it to happen, right?
Yeah, I do think the lawsuit is important here, because you mentioned like public shame and how crucial that is, and I want to believe that. I want to believe that that's true, but Ubisoft.
It's true, except when it isn't, right?
Yeah, Ubisoft like got thrown into the fire, right? And they had very weak, acknowledgement of what was going on. They were like, we're going to be better, and then months go by, and you get another report, and they're like, yeah, nothing has changed. Like, they're not interested in being better.
Right.
They're just not. They just want to do the absolute bare minimum so that it goes away.
Because it's the most. I think we talked about this a couple of episodes ago, but like it's like that thing in Fight Club with the insurance companies doing the risk assessment, where they're like, if a recall is cheaper than like the settlements of people dying, they just won't do it, or vice versa, whatever. Mm-hmm. Like there. It does start to feel like corporations are just like playing the waiting game with disgruntled employees, meaning employees who are being actively harassed, either waiting for them to just like fall in line or quit. And it's like, because it doesn't affect their bottom line, so they don't care to change it. They don't need to change it.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly where I was reading it, so forgive me, but there was a woman who left Blizzard, because it was wrapped up in all of this, and it made her very uncomfortable. And she was like, "This was my dream. Like this was what I wanted. I didn't want to leave."
Talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to leave, and it's just like, it makes your stomach churn. Like imagine getting your dream job and then just this den of shitty wolves that don't think the rules apply to them, or they don't have to treat people like human beings.
Right. Well, and also just like some people just, most people need a job to live, and like, it's easy to react and say like, well, if it's a bad environment, quit, leave, but it's not that simple. Like people can't just quit a job,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know, you guys didn't want to emphasize the inequity stuff as much, but I do think that in some ways
you got to emphasize all of it.
Yeah, I think that like different people have different things that they can react to, and so like I think some people can kind of block out just guys water cooler talk or whatever, and they can kind of put their heads down and just like, all right, I'm not going to let this affect me. But I think some of these other things where they have managers or HR telling them essentially that like, hey, your work's not good enough. And I saw something that like where somebody was having to basically like, they had to like make a list of like everything that they were doing all day. Their male coworkers didn't have to do this, right?
Right.
It's like if you had a conversation with somebody, you have to write that down and you have to do this, and you just like have to kind of prove your worth in a way that other people aren't being expected to do.
Right.
And I think that kind of thing can get in your head a lot easier, and it can be more debilitating in the long term, because it's kind of like puts you in like this almost like imposter syndrome kind of thing.
Right.
So it's like I'm not good enough to be here, and I try to tell HR, and they're like, well, maybe you should be doing better. And
right.
But then if you like look at their coworkers and they're like, no, you're amazing, you're doing excellent work. But they're not being told that from the people that are supposed to be the ones telling them that.
Yeah, one example in there that I had seen was one woman, like demonstrably, just on paper, she had, I don't know if she had closed twice as many accounts or handled twice as many projects as her male counterpart.
Yeah,
I think
it was a community manager.
Right, and then he got the promotion.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm referencing a different thing, but I think there was a community manager who was pregnant and like near the end of her pregnancy had to go to the bathroom a lot and got like reprimanded for that.
Oh gosh.
And then like was like, I had to be hospitalized for dehydration, and it's like that. Like imagine your only value being what you can have no life. There can be no accommodations for you. If you're just some grunt on the rung of the ladder at the bottom, like all you are is productivity. You can't spend time with your family. You can't cultivate meaningful relationships. But then the people at the top can bring butt plugs and lubrication and just kind of quietly walk away from the whole thing. Where that's like it's just like they're living in entirely different worlds, and it's just super unfair.
Well, and not always even the people at the top. It's like your peers, the people under you can behave however they want and see no repercussions. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't make me sound like you're going to say something.
It's all the money Bobby has. Better have some good lawyers, man.
Right.
Not paying your employees well either.
Well,
so.
and that's the thing with the statement. It's just like, man, it's just like once would you say like, hey, we think that some of the details are wrong, but we're going to just,
Right.
We're going to do everything that we can to make amends and like, why not? Bobby just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to like defer my salary for 5 years and, put that money into fixing some of these things.
Right.
But no, you never get that. You just get like a full on, we're going to fight this in court.
But it's man, like if you think the details of the allegations are incorrect, or you think that the people conducting the investigation haven't done their due diligence, those are totally appropriate things to feel and to fight against, right? But when you're facing down these kinds of allegations, right, you don't do it in the way that they did it, where it was like this sneering, like, anger and like, oh, how could you, right? And like, I think the thing that is even more upsetting is, I said the word sanctimonious earlier, and it's like you go and you watch BlizzCon, and Blizzard is very happy to get out there and, parade equality and parade progressiveness and parade like, oh, Blizzard games are for everybody. And it's like the foundation of everything you are selling is under attack. And so you can't have this like, oh, how could they accuse me of this attitude, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, and we were talking about this before, but it's really difficult to wrap your head around, how widespread this could be, like which actual, buildings and departments and studios. It's, because, I even saw people, that had worked there and had gone through this. They're like, well, I'm still really proud of my work, and I still really have like people that I respect at this company, and there are people, that are probably in another building, in another studio that they're not dealing with this, and now they're looking across and like, what are you guys doing? And just like that embarrassment, right? Of like, how do you even process that angle of things?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's weird too to like, because I mean we see so many examples of this, and like, just to be dramatic and play the like, oh, capitalism card or whatever, but like, the Bobby like doesn't care. He doesn't have a reason to care. He might not even know about this stuff because he exists in a different reality. Like, you see it in every stage of society, like, power corrupts, right? Like, the more power and influence you have or think you have, the worse you treat other people and the more removed from empathy you seem to become. At least that there are examples of that all over the place. And like, these stories coming out over and over and over again, it just seems to reinforce that to me. Like,
yeah,
like the 1% or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, but it just becomes more and more concrete with every story like this to me.
I think personally why this story just kind of punches through a little bit harder is for a very, very, very long time, everything I've ever seen about Activision makes this just totally unsurprising. But the Blizzard side of things, it wasn't all that long ago. Like, I've been to 5 or 6. I've been to a number of BlizzCons, right? And, I jumped at the chance to go because there was a point in time where I lived and breathed and ate and slept Blizzard because it felt like they cared, and you would go to BlizzCon and you would see like how attached to these things people were. You'd go to the panels and like the questions that people would ask, the cosplay shows, it just was like, I don't know, it was an actual community, like as crazy as it is to say, and it felt like it was something to really be like cherished and fostered. And it's bewildering that over the last few years I don't even have like a shred of that feeling anymore. Like, I don't feel any kinship at all. I don't feel any respect. I don't feel any passion. It's just products on a conveyor belt. And I think they're fortunate enough that they have done so many great things, so many monumental games, and done right by the community for years and years and years, that they still have been able to retain some of that, but I don't think that is going to last forever. And I honestly think the surge in Final Fantasy XIV, the 14 versus WoW comparisons are very fascinating and kind of play into all of this, but like it's soul crushing to see a company that had so much of real value, like something actually genuine, just shit all over it. Like it breaks my heart.
And like it makes me think back to the controversy that they had with you said his name, but I can't remember his name. Blitzchung, yeah. Like the courting of Chinese markets, like it's an interesting thing because it's like you see Tencent and stuff. It's just like if you get into that market, America doesn't really matter. Like, and like what we are hand wringing, our moralizing doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Like you'll make so much money that it doesn't matter. Like, they could close American offices and it wouldn't affect the bottom line. But
I think that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Right, where it's right. It used to feel like the decisions they were making weren't because like it didn't have to matter. Like they can do a bunch of things that are callous and cold.
I mean, even as recently as Overwatch, right?
Right.
Like there was a lot of heart in that project.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
That's what I mean, though. Is it felt like the guiding hand there wasn't, what do we have to do? It's like we want to do this. We think this is so special and so cool, and we can't wait to show it off to people. And it's
I brought it up as a means to like agree with you, like that seemed like out of character for them. Yeah. It was like you're following the money. Like when did that start? I mean, obviously they've always wanted to make money, but yeah. Woof.
Yeah, and it's sad because I cannot wait to play Diablo 2 Resurrected. But I think the reason I'm so excited is because it's like, oh yeah, it's like this is what Blizzard used to feel like. Like I think I honestly
nostalgic.
think I think that's what's driving so much of that excitement.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, that's another studio in another state,
Yes, yes.
Right. It makes me feel conflicted about 4 though. Like Diablo 4 cuz it's like I want to be excited but it's like I don't know. it's just complicated emotionally, yeah.
Yeah. And now, a word from our sponsor.
If you dread looking at your credit card statements, you're not alone. Debt can feel crippling, but Upstart can help you on your path to financial freedom. Upstart is the fast and easy way to pay off your debt with a personal loan all online. Whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high-interest debt, or funding personal expenses, over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get one fixed monthly payment. Upstart knows you're more than just your credit score and is expanding access to affordable credit. Unlike other lenders, Upstart considers your income and current employment to find you a smarter rate for your loan. With a 5-minute online rate check, you can see your rate upfront for loans between $1,000 to $50,000. You can receive funds as fast as 1 business day after accepting your loan. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/easyallies. That's upstart.com/easyallies. Don't forget to use our URL to let them know we sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application. Go to upstart.com/easyallies. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Life is full of stressors. It doesn't matter who you are or what you have, your life is probably stressful. You may not be feeling down and out depressed or like you're at a total loss, but if your stress is high, your temper is shorter than usual, or even if you're starting to feel strain in any of your relationships, you could probably use the chance to unload. Unload the stress and get it out. Talk to someone who's completely unbiased about your life, someone who isn't going to judge you or take sides on anything. When there are things you can't tell anyone, you need to unload it, and that's what therapy can be. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Unload the stressors and get some unbiased feedback. You'd be pretty surprised at what you might gain from it. See if it's for you. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Easy Allies listeners get 10% off of their first month at betterhelp.com/allies. That's BetterHelp.com/allies. And if you are a patron of Easy Allies, thank you.
Okay, next up, we've got 2 Ubisoft stories. I think we'll just kind of combine them together. Both kind of messy in kind of different ways. We have a new game announcement that just kind of jumped out of nowhere called XDefiant. And then we got a big expose, a lot of detail on Skull and Bones and the 8 years of development there that Kotaku did. But let's talk about XDefiant first, Ben. I think you're really the one who's looked at that the most and really had the most reaction to it.
Yeah, it was the Hotake on the latest episode of Frame Trap 138, and I was pretty amped up about it, and that was Huber and myself and Brad talking about it. And so, like, I'm almost hesitant to just kind of regurgitate what I said, and I definitely want to give you guys a chance to give your thoughts on it. But basically, it really ties into all this Blizzard stuff that we've been talking about, where it just feels soulless. I don't think there's a better word for it, where like everything feels like kind of co-opted in a way that feels so insincere. Like even the like highlighted XD, you know, just like trying to incorporate internet culture, saying it's punk rock, but not really fighting not really fighting against anything or having any sort of message or being anti-establishment in any way. And then, you know, supposedly being a celebration of Ubisoft and what makes those games special. And it seems, at least in the reveal trailer, you know, about as far as they go is here's the Splinter Cell night vision goggles, right? Which it's just, I don't know, it just feels like nothing. And, you know, I said this on Frame Trap. It's like I haven't played the game. I could be totally wrong. Right. I think it's easy to be cynical about these games in the outset and then be proven wrong later on. Like Pokemon Unite is a good example. I was playing that today, digging into that, and I've been really enjoying it so far. And I had nothing but apathy to express towards it before. And so your opinion can definitely change.
Yeah, I think for me, just like a lot of it just feels kind of dissonant, right? Like a hero shooter, but Tom Clancy, but punk rock. It's like
it feels like it was made by an algorithm.
Yeah. Well, and you know, and like I don't mean this to be like you know like insulting or anything, but it does feel to me like a game that was made for China. You know, you were talking about the Chinese market earlier, and it's like if Ubisoft makes a game that the Chinese market will like, then they don't have to care if we like it. You know, they'll get their audience and they'll get a lot of people playing it.
The thing is like, I feel like I would almost be more okay with it if like that was what they said. Like you can't shove this nothingness in front of me and be like, we are so excited. Here's all the people. This is such a special thing, you know. And it's just like that. You know, you said the word dissonance there, and I think that's absolutely right. It's like what you're selling and the way that you're presenting it is. I feel like they're completely at odds with each other.
The other thing that was funny to me that I do want to bring up is the way that they revealed this and promoted this. Because they'd be like, hey, we're going to have a big reveal for you tomorrow. And then they had multiple people, outlets and influencers, post clips. These quick little like 15-second clips from their gameplay. And like we're looking at the game. What do you mean you're revealing this tomorrow? We're looking at it. Mm-hmm. And it just looks like Call of Duty to me from this brief amount of time that I'm getting to look at it. And then whenever the reveal happened, and I didn't even bother to look at it, I saw the name and I saw the press release and I kind of moved on.
I was incensed because they're like, okay, it's a shooter, so above all, the gunplay's got to be good. And it's like, fucking duh. Like, what does that mean? How are you making it good? How is this different from any other shooter? I know. I assume that the gunplay needs to be good.
Well, also, these two dudes standing in a warehouse talking business over this gameplay while explaining that it's punk rock. That's like the least punk rock thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Oh wow.
Everything is like completely uninteresting to me about this.
Yeah.
They seem to be like they're trying to make such a big deal about this, and I was like, you made one of the most least exciting announcements of 2021 so far. I was like, congratulations. It's like, I mean, you might be right, but maybe it is. Despite them telling it to our face, you should be excited. Maybe this isn't
Right.
for us,
Mm-hmm.
and time will tell, and maybe it actually will end up being really good. But like, man, talk about like one of the worst first impressions you can make. It's
Yeah.
like, wow. No one really cares. Is not going to care about this for a while until you get some hands-on with this. So good luck with that. It's not like they have any other troubled developments going on as well.
Well, it's funny because I feel like it's such a machine that they can just kind of do things until it works out. Like no one remembers Hyperscape, and that was not long ago,
Yeah.
right? And
Is that shut down, or is it still kicking around?
doesn't matter,
I'll check.
right? It's just like they're at it. Like imagine. Go with me on this metaphor, right? Ubisoft is just this person sitting in a computer, and all of these projects are like icons on the desktop, and it's just like, Hyperscape didn't work out, and they just click and they just drag it to the recycling bin, right? That's what it feels like. It's just of no consequence, really. Like they have so many things, and enough of them are mega successes that it just kind of doesn't matter. But it makes it hard then to get excited at all.
And then the other thing.
They announced in October 2020 that it failed to meet expectations and they're going to overhaul the game's gameplay and systems. No. But that's
well, then that leads right into Skull and Bones. the refusal to kill a thing that's not working.
Well, they legally can't.
Well, apparently.
Yeah. That's the really interesting part. Yeah.
Some agreement with Singapore that they have to release. But the thing is, they don't have to release this game.
Right, it just has
they
to
could
be
release
some
a different
new IP.
game.
Yeah.
Like, just crap together a match 3 and put it out in Singapore or whatever.
I mean, but 8 years, right? All the time developing all of those assets, putting all that effort into it. I think from a production standpoint,
then developing the assets again.
I think that's called the sunk cost fallacy.
Then developing the assets again.
I understand. I'm just saying, like, I think it would be better to just release a whatever thing from their perspective. I'm not saying this is the right thing to do. Just saying, like, from their eyes, it's probably better to release this thing as is, even if it's terrible, than completely try to make a brand new game.
It doesn't seem that way. It doesn't seem like this game has enough organization to be completed at this point.
Yes, but I don't. Because of that, I don't think they have the organization to do anything else.
And that's really if you haven't dug into the story yet, that's really the kind of the crux of this. They compared it to Anthem of all things.
No.
Is that there's no direction, and what direction that they have had continues to change. So people will work towards one thing, and then somebody at corporate will see it and be like, well, this is our feedback, and then they'll go back and they'll change it to go back in this other direction, and then. And they keep shifting things around. And so, at one point it was part of Assassin's Creed. And then another point, it's just, you're just going to be controlling ships. And then they decide, well, we need to really have like people walking around. But the thing's not made for people walking around. And it just keeps changing and changing. And meanwhile, again, like the people that are having to make the assets, the technology is getting beyond them. And so now they have to make a new engine, and they have to make new textures, and just a horrible nightmare of working on this project.
Yeah,
I feel like this goes back to something you were talking about earlier, Isla, but just slightly different context, but same point that, man, maybe there just aren't, a lot of like managers being groomed correctly in, this industry, because so much mismanagement of projects, this right here, it's just like, what's going on with like a lot of these projects, like even with like, what we were just talking about before, it's like, was there no one that could see how obvious like this is not right, and how you do a project without any kind of vision? So especially something like a pirate themed game, like a seafaring game. It's like it's already a pretty hard sell, I feel like.
Right.
And once Sea of Thieves came out, it's like you got to pick something now and go with it. And it's like, obviously it sounds something that was reactionary, but at the same time, it sounded like problems were going on long before Sea of Thieves ever showed up too.
There was a point where it made a lot of sense, right? You think about the kind of when the like ship stuff was taking off in Assassin's Creed.
Yeah,
that was very like largely well received, and like tons of people played Assassin's Creed and did the ship stuff, and so there's kind of like a natural flow from this to the other. There's points of comparison you can make, and it's like, oh, it's so much more fleshed out now. That time has long passed. Like, yeah, you can still use a boat in Valhalla, but that's not even like a bullet point on the box anymore. Like, there's so many other features now that it's just the series has kind of moved on, and so yes, this naval battle pirate game doesn't really make sense anymore in the way that it used to.
Well, and that's the wild irony of this to me too, is like the very core inception, the beginning of this idea was, hey, we've got this cool boat tech. Why don't we just bang together a quick like multiplayer little thing and just throw it out there because we've got the stuff all done. Yeah. Like what started with a simple idea has ballooned into this monstrosity for a decade almost. It's just wild. And like that's what's so nuts about, I mean, Damiani, you said you can't go into something without a plan, and like I was going to say that in gaming, because prototyping a game is a much more costly thing than like writing the screenplay to a say like a multi-million-dollar sci-fi film trilogy. So like you could come up with a plan really easily and then shift in the scripting stage. You only have 4 or 5 people involved. Sometimes people go into a trilogy without a plan too in big blockbuster films. But like this, you have to spend a lot of money and have a big team to prototype something like this over and over and over again. And like that's how you get into that sunk cost fallacy thing where it's like they've gotten this thing to 35-40% like 6 times. And it's got them convinced that they need to get it to 100% someday. But it's like, you've already gotten it to 200%, like, cost-wise.
In so many of these companies, I don't understand how they get set on these massive scales for things that should be, the scale of it should be a fraction of what it is.
Well, they should have just puked it out like they said in the beginning.
Well, and that's part of the craziness with this story is it's not just this core team of people that, there should be like a small team of like 30 people that are like, okay, we're gonna nail down, we're gonna gray box this thing, we're gonna figure out what the game actually is.
Right.
Before we start, building out like, I don't know how many ship assets and textures and everything that they're doing.
Before we have a massive presentation at E3.
But the opposite is happening.
Yeah.
More teams from around the world are now getting sucked into this project to try to save it, and it's not getting saved.
Well, and it's interesting because people on the team, they would get pulled off to work on things like Assassin's Creed, and they were like, it became like a lifeboat where it's like, oh, thank God, like, thank you for saving me from this project.
I'm just flat.
That's all you need to say.
Yeah, it's like I understand. Like, I don't know. I'm not a game developer. I don't understand how these can lead to this. It's like this just reeks to me of like someone at Ubisoft is still convinced, oh, this is gonna be a big thing. We just gotta keep at it. Like this could have a big payoff someday. Like it's gonna be like a Fortnite or something like that. Just like the people at Capcom probably thought RE-verse was like gonna be a big thing and stuff and wasted like it's that type of mentality. I think that leads to stuff like that.
Similar,
it's like it's like someone like George Lucas, go tell him this is a bad idea. Someone to stand up and say, bad, stop, don't do this.
But here's the problem. They don't have a bad idea. They don't have an idea.
Yeah.
They could go in any of these directions, but it keeps shifting on them.
That's what's so interesting about this AAA design environment instead of, well, I know a few indie environments where this following a big success, like you can kind of spin your wheels for a year or two and brainstorm on like boots on the ground like this, like on the fly, come up with your game while you're making it, But like most of the other time, you've got to pitch an idea and then you make that idea. But like in these big development houses, they don't have to do that, so they can get trapped like this. It's so wild.
This, I guess, isn't directly related to Skull and Bones, but the whole corporate, like, we gotta follow this success is infuriating because you like look at Fortnite in particular. Fortnite is an absolute miracle. It's a miracle that Fortnite happened because Fortnite was not conceptualized as this massive battle royale game that would change the world. It was looking at Minecraft. And it was it was a completely different game with a completely different focus that was chasing after the trend at the time that was in development hell for forever.
Yeah, it kind of failed.
And truly, miraculously, they were able to turn it around. And so I think it is just pure idiocy to go, oh, we need to copy that. And it's like, it's amazing that even happened. Like, you don't understand.
But it's because I feel like, you know, maybe not to be too presumptuous, but some of these, like, maybe younger producers, they know people like to be fed those lines. It's like what the higher-ups like to hear. That's what gets them the budgets, maybe. And so they sell that concept. And it's like, we're going to go chase this. And, like, maybe that's why we're leading to so many of these projects just being, like, so, like, haphazard. Or, you know, they end in failure like this is because
they've had
they
issues
don't understand.
with management shifting around and stuff, too. So I don't think they've had a clear leader throughout all of this. So
well, and what's funny too about like using the example of Fortnite or PUBG, you know, like the wild success and the popularity and the install base on battle royales justifies a bunch of copycats, right? But like Sea of Thieves is, I think, currently the most popular pirate game, and I don't think its install base justifies another big pirate game. Like, we have it.
Yeah.
We don't need.
There's a few of them out there actually. But now that's the other problem. There have been quite a few other pirate games.
Like, I don't think the market needs this, no matter what their idea ends up being.
I mean,
like, unless they do make it a hardcore sim, like Sid Meier's Pirates or something, like, which they said they tried for a second, and like maybe the current iteration is that with like a more of a survival, like Rust kind of vibe. It's like, okay, that's a different angle for a pirate thing. Like, I could see that being popular if it's like Rust, Sea of Thieves, but like still, I don't know, like the cost that they've spent on it, they're barely gonna make back. I don't know.
The other thing now is, and I, you know, not that you didn't assume something was going wrong with Skull and Bones before, right? Like, it was pretty obvious, but the detail of this report just puts a stink on this game that even when it comes out, like, you're gonna be going into the game knowing in detail the hell that it went through. And so the core gaming audience is going to have this kind of solidified skepticism that makes something that was already impossible to overcome, like, even that much of a higher hill.
Like, how do you save this game?
It's going to come full circle. It's just going to come out as a mode for the Assassin's Creed, the new platform.
Yeah,
there you go.
And
they're going to introduce it just like Battlefield. Like, we've been working like 10 years on this. Like, we're very excited now.
To Assassin's Creed Portal.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't the initial name of this like something Infinite? Like, it was.
Assassin's Creed Infinite.
I don't think it was Assassin's Creed. But
okay,
But it was definitely associated with Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. My goodness.
Oh, Damian, that's very funny.
Also this week, Tencent is buying Sumo Digital, $1.3 billion. So say goodbye to Sackboy sequel. Maybe.
This is hyperbole.
I don't know how Tencent works with this stuff, but yeah.
This is hyperbole, but I feel like every episode of the podcast, it's like we could almost have a Tencent buys segment in also this week.
This should be the new bets. Just bet on who Tencent's buying each week. Yep.
More Ubisoft news. Riders Republic and Rainbow Six Extraction both got pushed. Riders Republic was just about a month. Rainbow Six is January now.
So the Extraction is especially weird to me because that thing has been cooking for such a long time. They finally show it off in pretty great detail. And then out of nowhere, you know, a month after E3, they're like, "Yeah, no, it's not happening." It's concerning for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, you know, what pushes those schedules like that. Lavere is making a $275 pair of sneakers and a $70 hat based on the Sega Mega Drive.
I love me my Mega Drive, but those shoes look like shit. They look really bad.
They look really cheap.
Yeah, they do.
The 3DS and Wii U digital stores are removing the ability to pay with credit cards in Japan. Would not be surprised to see that end up coming this way. You can still pay with wallet amounts and with gift cards, but it's just kind of what we saw with PlayStation when they're still going to be doing it on PlayStation. But yeah, they were saying we got to pull off these PS3 and these PSP stores.
This would maybe be less of an issue if the Switch had a lot of these sweet-ass virtual console games available in a way that was convenient and easy to access.
It's the Nintendo.
You don't like Jelly Boy?
That's what I mean. Japan got Shin Megami Tensei, and we got fucking Jelly Boy!
Following up on last week's news, Netflix confirmed they will be focusing on mobile titles for their initial video game strategy, and it's going to be included in your subscription cost.
I'm surprised about that last part.
I think this is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's going to be. I'm curious where it's going to go from here. Mm-hmm. We'll have to see what the games look like. But it lines up with what we were saying last week in terms of the background of the person they had hired and all of that. So obviously, since they just hired that person, I'm guessing it's going to be a while.
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Also, didn't Netflix just announce like 3 new video game adaptations? Like, it's going to get to the point where they're going to be stretched for, like, what do we adapt next? And it's going to be like, well, here's the Gex movie or something. Like, it's just...
Yo, I'd watch it.
Yeah, I would. That would be great. I'm just saying, like, it's just like... It's gotten so constant that I forgot a Dynasty Warriors movie is on there.
Yeah.
Right. And finally, New World is bricking EVGA 3090s.
This is nuts.
It seems like there's a patch out now that might address it for some people, but it's a combination of apparently some flaw with those 3090s and some flaw with New World, and just basically sent them using all their power until they burn themselves out.
Can you imagine getting a 3090 after trying so hard, paying $1,300 or whatever, being really excited about getting into
How much money did you say?
Or 14, 15, whatever.
Tried 2,000.
2,000, okay. Even worse. Being really excited to get into the New World beta, and then it bricks your fucking $2,000. God, it sucks.
And they can't replace it.
That's crazy.
It's time for love and respect.
Love and respect.
Man, I feel like we could just title the episode of this podcast Hell World.
Well, continuing on that.
Oh, gosh.
DJ Deathcool, in regards to the Activision Blizzard and Ubisoft controversies, I am a video professional who's worked in a variety of jobs. Making my way into the video games industry has been a long-term dream of mine. We talked about this, dream jobs. But after today's news, I can say with confidence, my desire to work in the industry is dead. My question for the team, does news as massive and as bleak as this impact your desire to continue working in the industry? Does it inspire the team to come up with more creative content that doesn't depend on video games? I'm in a pretty bleak place after this news, and I'm curious the kind of direct impact it makes on you all as people who work in the industry. Thanks a bunch.
Very good question. You know, I can't speak for the other 7 people of this company, but I think I get immensely frustrated and jaded, I think, with certain things that happen in the industry, but like none of that applies to Easy Allies itself. You know, like I love working here, and I love you guys, and I'm close to all of you, and so I think we're fortunate enough to be like part of a good company, but I can imagine people coming into this industry, especially on the development side, the production side, the marketing side, it is having an impact. I mean, because the people that are applying for those jobs, the ones that will get it are very smart people, very up-to-date people. Like, they're following along. They know what's happening. They're reading the temperature. And I can imagine it would scare you away, because not only do you have to deal with potentially like horrible, abusive workplace environments, even if you don't have that, right? Like, let's say you work at a pretty cool studio, you have to deal with irate fans who like will get mad that your game has some bugs, right? And will send you death threats over that, right? So it's like, that's a whole nother layer on the shit cake that you have to get through. And like, that's been very evident for a super long time. And now more and more, toxic workplace environment things are coming to light. So yeah, I can imagine it's steering people away.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's very disheartening to read, especially on my like own social media feed, about other people who work in the journalistic capacity, who are just like have had it with how things have been going, and to a point where a few of them are just saying like, I can't wait to get out of this shit show and go anywhere else but here. And that's not good. Even if we haven't like great here at Easy Allies, like it's still not good from the industry at large. Is basically sending that message to all the younger generation and to like anyone interested at any age to jump into this industry. It's pushing people away, and we will all feel the consequences of that if it keeps going in that direction. So definitely needs to be remedied. And I don't know I don't know the perfect solution other than to say that we just need to be better at holding people accountable and calling out when this shit happens, and trying to like point out as much of the positive stuff that's still happening, and putting like a spotlight on that stuff, because it can also get overwhelmed with a lot of negativity sometimes, and there's still good things that are going on in this industry, and it's like don't want them to get like overshadowed and like drowned out sometimes. Even though as important as this stuff is, this still needs to be heard, but there's still like some good. As like Samwise Gamgee said in Lord of the Rings, there's still some good, in the world out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, I completely agree. And I think about, like Ben said, in our job, for me personally, it's more like the comments or social media stuff, like the fandom that threatens my enjoyment of this industry more than, because we don't deal with corporate BS directly. Like we're very fortunate in that regard. But as far as to the asker here, like I think about my friends who work at like Glitch City or other indie outfits, and I think that like so many of them just have such lovely experiences working with smaller teams of 8-10 people, and like sure, sometimes you have to people have to be fired or whatever, but like there are communities you can find within this industry that are truly wonderful. Like one of the devs from Samurai Gun like saw our stream and reached out to me on Twitter and was like, it was so much fun watching you guys. Like it was so great. And I'm just like, that's awesome. And like, I know some of those guys personally, and it's just like, it's out there. That stuff is there. Like having worked in corporate settings before, like I feel very fortunate that I don't have to do that anymore. Like, I don't like it. And that for me personally, and I think that we're very fortunate that we don't have to do that. Sometimes you don't have that option, but I would say look into smaller outfits. If it's your passion, like don't work for Activision. Try to work for Yacht Club, or try to work for, a team of 10 people or something. Like it's out there is all I'm saying.
Taking what you're saying, Isla, and wrapping it back around, I think it's incredibly telling that truly tons of people, like some of the best and brightest that have left Blizzard, they have gone on to form their own small studio.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and there are people that are, despite the fact that there's all these acquisitions and buying, companies buying each other up right now, there are also quite a few people that are announcing new companies, right? Like we're talking about Dead Space, the team that's making the Callisto protocol or whatever,
right?
They're just getting started up. I see people hiring all the time, so it is difficult, to try to find your place, because I think even if we're not dealing with someplace that's totally toxic or anything, sometimes it's just about having that sort of vibe right.
Right.
You know, being with a group of people that you just sort of mesh with.
Yeah.
And if you get that right, then sometimes, like, even if you are working longer hours, if everybody's having a blast doing it and you're not feeling burnt out, like, some of that is okay. You know, some of that before you get to the crunch level of where you're just, like, grinding your life away, like, you know, working long hours on a project and then seeing it come to fruition can be very rewarding. But again, it's like, it's about how well you're meshing together, how well your voice is being heard. You know, if something is going wrong, do you actually have an outlet for it to be addressed or not? You know, and a lot of that you can only really get by, you know, trying to get a hold of people that they're already working there and seeing, you know, how their experience is and what their personality is like.
And that's totally true, Bloodworth, of every industry. Like, I don't know this person's life situation, you know, but like giving up white male privilege was definitely something I've noticed, like, personally. And, like, if you don't fit into that box and if you check, you know, like, if you're a person of color, if you're queer, whatever, like, you know, there are these challenges, like, other things. And, like, any industry that you're in, you know, has those challenges for women, for anybody, you know. And, like, not to say that, you know, white men don't also face these challenges, but, like, I guess what I'm saying is, like, if it's your dream to work in games, don't give up on it for this reason, because this reason is in every industry.
Right.
And
you know, you can find the good apples, the good places in this industry, and if you quit this industry, you'd have to do the same in any other industry.
And what I think is truly poison, like, it's tough because in a lot of ways, this has been kind of a depressing podcast talking about depressing news, because these things do need to be talked about and discussed. They are going on. But removed from that, you know, social media and a lot of the news that we consume is fundamentally built to be shocking and depressing and to make you angry, right? It is, a lot of it feeds off outrage. And again, not that there aren't totally valid things that you should be outraged about, but I think it is easy to kind of fall into, like, the doom scrolling mindset of everything always everywhere is bad, and that's just not a healthy and productive mindset for anybody. I mean, there are good things happening in this industry. There are games coming out all of the time that will put a smile on your face, that didn't kill people to make them. And so I do think sometimes it's important to take a step back, to kind of get away from the like meat grinder of social media and remind yourself why you liked this stuff in the first place.
Hear, hear.
Not nearly as depressing. From JG.
Nice.
Hey, allies. If Kirby used this copy ability on you, what would be the special ability that he gets from you? What does he look like?
That's tricky.
That is tricky.
Yeah, because Kirby already can, like, with his body shape and stuff, he can, like, fit into, like, any kind of, like, shape and tight spaces. Because I say, like, something to do with, like, collision detection, but, like, Kirby kind of already got that going for them. So, like, kind of at a loss here for what power Kirby would get if he copied from me.
He could beat FTL.
Kirby already would, like, man, you don't understand. Kirby is, like, more powerful than any Dragon Ball character. Like, Kirby is the most powerful thing in not only Nintendo universe, probably, like, in existence. Kirby's a god.
Yeah, he survived,
Kirby's a god.
All of the Smash Brothers.
Yeah, he saved Smash Brothers. There would be no Smash Brothers without Kirby.
Damiani, my mind kind of went in the same place. So I thought maybe to, like, make this question, like, a little bit easier to process, be like, imagine, like, a hyper-exaggerated version of yourself. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not just like he's ingesting you in this world. You're in the Kirby world. So what qualities that you have that you could maybe, like, amplify and contextualize in the world of Kirby?
Kirby? When Kirby swallows me, he's going to come back and transform into a cat girl.
Damiani, you got something you want to say?
There you go.
I love that, Damiani.
When Kirby ingests me, he puts on a chef's hat and he screams Hotake, and he has a flaming chopping fist.
That's perfect.
Isla?
Just like a confidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see that.
Okay.
I can see that.
All right.
I can see that.
Superpower, confidence.
Yeah.
Kirby
Yeah.
eats me and just feels really good about himself.
Must be nice.
Sometimes.
So I just imagine, like when you get like a lump of clay and you like roll it out as like the snake.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
So I imagine Kirby kind of looking like that, but vertical.
Oh my God, blood.
And then the glasses up there, and then the arms towards the top. But I think for the power, I think what Kirby could do is it would still have the suction, but it would like suck in like just like a whole row of like books or papers or something, and then spit them all back out on a shelf, and they'll just be in order.
Alphabetizing Brad.
Wow.
You win, blood.
Yeah.
You definitely win. That was the
Congratulations.
best.
I forgot to mention that with the confidence comes depersonalization. So he loses all sense of reality. Yeah. Important
It's the
other half
world of
that.
Kirby. What sense of reality is there?
Oh, I don't know. You don't know until it's gone.
Okay, fair.
From Rodrigo. Hi, allies. Just as video killed the radio star, did remasters kill the virtual console? When I bought a Switch a couple years ago, I thought to myself that beyond the current catalog, I was buying into the promise that I would eventually be able to play dozens of legacy titles in something akin to the virtual console. Needless to say, it wasn't really the case. Similarly with Sony, if I feel like playing something retro, it'll be on my old PS3, which is where the store still sells those old PS1 and PS2 games that just seem to vanish on PS4 and probably won't be sold on PS5. My reasoning is, did companies realize that instead of putting everything into a store and selling old games for $5 or $10, they could just package ports and remasters of something new and sell it for a higher price, either based on nostalgia possibly to boost sales of a new game coming up, or to boost sales of a new game coming up. Not just Nintendo and Sony, but Square, Konami, and so many others. It feels like things will never go back to being so simple as having something like Virtual Console when everyone wants to repackage and resell their old games. So do you think we should give up on Virtual Console and other legacy stores, and by the same logic, will we never see some older games on newer platforms?
I totally see where this email is coming from, but I disagree with the premise. Because I think that is a natural thing to do, and I've had that very same thought that the question asker had. But this trend of remakes and remasters is not new to the last couple of years. It's really been like pretty dominant for a long time now, and I think it comes down to more of interest level across a broad array of people, right? So you think about the Wii, and I want to bring up the Switch in a second as well. When the Virtual Console was announced at E3, I believe, for the Wii, the gaming nerds...
I don't even know if it was called the Wii yet. I think we were still talking Revolution.
Revolution.
Yeah.
Anyway, my point is like, amongst that demographic, which you don't understand how small it is until you go outside of it, was super stoked about it. That is not what the story of the Wii is. The story of the Wii is branching out, reaching totally new markets that had never played video games before. It was about accessibility. It was about the way that you played was different, right? The Virtual Console is beloved, and rightfully so, but by a comparatively small percentage of people. The Switch is kind of the same way, where like I get really mad that you get Jelly Boy instead of Shin Megami Tensei, but when I talk to my nephew who has put in 1,250 hours into Fortnite on his Switch, he doesn't care. Like the Switch is his first video game console. He doesn't have that love of those old games and those things. And so, yes, I think it would be nice, but I don't think it is driven by, we want to just remake and resell it to you. I think that's part of it, but I think it's more of an interest level and like focusing resources on that thing.
I don't want to answer every company, but like going off of Nintendo here as well, they've demonstrated that they find more value in doing the same thing that Disney's been doing. I mean, everyone calls it the Disney Vault now, and the Nintendo Vault. They know the value of their older games. They know that simply making them readily available at all times kind of diminishes the importance of them. That the interest level is not like always there for them. And yes, it only speaks to maybe a smaller population of their consumers. Whereas when they make them these limited time events, as we've seen with the more recent examples with the Mario 3D All-Stars, with the finally releasing Fire Emblem out here, the first one out here, it was an event. You have this much time to go get it. Everyone's talking about it. They know what they're doing. It's very calculated, and I'm sure they make way more money from that like really quick tentpole event than they would just listing that game on there for the entirety. And like it's about control, and they like having things show up in certain times with their like reports. They got to impress their investors, and it's like, we need a big holiday title. Oh, everyone's expecting like a big AAA release. No, it's Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Look at this, one of the best-selling games of like last year. It's like, like that's how they do this, and I don't think you're ever gonna see them go back to anything other than like the NES, SNES catalog. Even that, like they're not really like treating that seriously anymore.
They
like,
clearly don't care.
They're like, here's some offerings because like we need you to still pay us every month for this or your yearly or whatever. But like, it's like, just look at what Disney's doing. Nintendo's doing it for that. That's for them. The other companies, if anyone else has any opinions, I don't want to take forever talking about this, but I think it's a case by case basis with each other company, though.
Yeah, but Damian, you bring up several really interesting points, but the one that I kind of want to focus on is you mentioned like the online subscription service to the Switch, which obviously part of the appeal of that is accessing NES games and Super Nintendo games, but I think about kind of how it's pivoted, and maybe in a way that like kind of makes sense for them, where the things that really have blown up with Switch Online are not that you can play The Legend of Zelda from NES on your Switch Online, but Tetris 99.
Yeah, right.
Or
exactly.
or you know, the Super Mario game or the new Pac-Man game. It's like those new games have generated more buzz and excitement and interest, at least in the short term, that like I have to imagine if you're like, okay, we want to incentivize people to pay for this service, the answer isn't adding more old games, as sweet as that would be. I'm not saying that that's what I want, but for them, it's like, oh, what if we like kind of create a new viral sensation that everybody pays attention to?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, because they had the data from the Virtual Console sales. They know the extent of where they're going to get with that. So it's just something there to appease, you know, those same consumers, because they still exist and they still want to hook them in as well, because they also are probably the ones who are spending the most money in the ecosystem.
Right.
But they also, to expand just the services numbers, they have to offer something broader, and that's what these titles like Tetris 99 are offering.
Right, because the important thing I think to note is the consumers that really care about those old games will either pay for a service or like use a service like Virtual Console or Nintendo Online, or they would buy a remake or a remaster. Like they just want the game so badly that whatever way they can take it, they'll probably check it out. Versus so like, as a company, it's like we can appeal to them by reselling them the same old game and get even more people in by focusing our efforts elsewhere rather than, you know, really committing to a service like Virtual Console. As shitty as it is, I swear I would love a Virtual Console.
Right.
But.
And I have to imagine that, I mean, much like the emotion chip and stuff on the PS whatever for backwards compatibility of hardware issues, like OS and software compatibility issues are probably a thing. And you're right, they have the information that they know how many of these games on Virtual Console they would sell, and they were like, the pain in the butt to get these things to run on our new OS or whatever isn't worth it. Like,
unless you're Microsoft, though.
Right.
Apparently.
Yeah. But
that's what's interesting.
Work.
Yeah, it does, you know, and that's why you've seen over time they roll out, you know, gradually more games.
But also,
Definitely.
like, Nintendo and Sony have more new IP that, I don't know, that's cynical maybe. I think, I
don't think that that's a fair take. I think Game Pass is like
Game Pass is incredible.
Proven itself time and again. But I think the difference there is you could probably argue that Microsoft as a whole, or Xbox as a whole, is pivoting more towards the Game Pass subscription.
Yeah.
And that's becoming a focus for them. I don't think like Nintendo Online is like the same level of focus or investment
right. And in a Game
as Game Pass or Game Pass Ultimate is.
In a Game Pass subscription model, having a huge back library makes sense financially.
Right.
Like that makes sense.
Because it's kind of the crux.
But we're
of
not
it.
even just talking about
It's the
Game
whole
Pass.
point
Though.
of
We're
it.
talking about like on an Xbox, you can throw in an
Right.
Xbox disc,
Exactly.
and
Right.
it runs. That's
well, and that's
definitely.
that's another part that goes back to hardware and infrastructure and OS and stuff. Like Microsoft has been very deliberate about each console iteration being effectively just like a new PC. It's just like
Right.
an updated version of the same thing. Like the Series X has the same OS as the One, and like the PS5 is an entirely different machine.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
like Microsoft they have been doing this from the word go.
Yeah. Also, I mean, just from the perspective of like putting out remasters, more like speaking to like Sony and Nintendo, more so maybe Sony, is that I mean, I see people accuse them of like they don't want to like honor their legacy by not offering originals available even like digitally. And I do think there should be a compromise there at some point. They should at least digitally start to offer some of their games because for preservation purposes. But at the same time, as more time goes by, newer generations, I'm not trying to say that like younger people can't tolerate older looking games, but if you're trying to get people into a series and you want like, oh, this is an important landmark game, by updating it and kind of modernizing it a bit, you do open it up to like a larger
Right.
audience.
Yep.
It makes it far more
Totally.
accessible.
Yep.
And I'm really all for that. I'm for both. I wish they would preserve the original, but also offer updated new versions each time they want to do that. And that seems to be like specifically Sony likes to go for that angle. I think they like to update the visuals. They want to make it look as nice as it can, because if it looks nice and runs well and feels modernized, you're more likely to play and enjoy it than you have to really get in the mindset of like, oh, this was like a 2000s PS2 game. I got to like deal with like some of the jank and stuff. It's like that might be a little bit too much for some people. And like veterans, they have like rose tinted goggles. They like more, they were there in the moment. They remember it more fondly.
Yes,
so it's harder.
But they want to play the new version so they can complain about it online.
Exactly. Yeah.
See, so from a company perspective, they've got them all.
They got
it's
'em
like
hooked.
they want to get the people is they're gonna get so excited when they're like, no, the original was so much better, and here's 3 pages telling you why.
Yeah. Well, and I think, unfortunately, like, because as much as I've got a lot of virtual console games, so I would really love for them to be just
too.
ported over.
Yeah.
But it's quite telling that they're essentially doing the same thing, aside from pricing structure and depth with the Switch, but they're just like, yeah, you don't have to pay for these. Just give us some, your monthly online subscription. It just kind of comes with it.
Well,
like that sort of indicates that these things don't sell enough to be worth selling them.
And they priced themselves into a corner with the Nintendo Online, because when it came out, like it had to kind of come out when it did, but $20 a year isn't worth giving you a huge Wii library, a huge DS library, a huge thing. Like, I think that $20 a year is worth some NES and SNES
Jelly
titles and Jelly Boy. Whereas, like, PlayStation Plus, like, you're getting, like, pretty frequently decent games. And, like, Game Pass,
Sometimes
obviously.
brand new games.
Right,
Yeah.
sometimes brand new games. And, like, Nintendo priced themselves out of that model. So then the big boy games that they want to bring back, they sell to you for full retail, like the Mario 3D All-Stars.
Well, and I think the other thing to think about, like specifically in the case of Nintendo, is this is not the first time they've re-released a lot of these games. Like, I bet collectively we couldn't even name all of the different ways that Super Mario Brothers or The Legend of Zelda have been released over the years.
Yeah.
And
Zelda and Metroid in particular.
yeah.
So many times that they've just been like put in as a bonus in some
So
other
many-
game.
Yes,
Yeah.
so many times in so many different avenues, right? Where it's like, at some point, it is diminishing returns. Where it's like it's not really, like, it's nice, it's appreciated, it's cool that it's on this console that you're already playing anyway, but it doesn't have the same wow factor when it's been released 10 times before.
It's time for bets. Next week, on July 27th, Capcom will release The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. This time next week, I'm basically making Brandon go through the first 10 reviews on OpenCritic. How many times will he find the word objection? Michael Damiani.
5.
Ben Moore.
10.
Ooh. Isla Hink.
4.
Oh. I also put 4. Uh-oh. Oh, boy. There's no way to win next week. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe I'm overestimating, but I think it's going to be a good number just because it's few words are as synonymous with the series as objection is with Ace Attorney.
Yeah, a lot of those closing lines.
Yeah.
You will not raise an objection.
Yeah, exactly. I was writing those same sentences in my head, dude. Yes.
This week, Last Stop launched on July 22nd. That's today. And Brandon asked, how long will the credits be? Damiani bet 3 minutes. Michael Huber bet 2 minutes and 55 seconds. Isla bet 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I bet 4 minutes and 18 seconds. And Brandon bet 1 minute and 55 seconds. The time was 2 minutes and 44 seconds, which makes Huber the winner. Ben is in Huber's seat. And that brings our scores to Jovial Penguins 18.
You're just jealous because I'm a genuine freak.
That's literally what I have on my phone right now.
Am I supposed to do quotes? Can somebody just tell me that I need to do quotes?
It's just these two. Okay. It's just these two. And Vociferous Beavers 13. Nom 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 nom. Let me tell you about patreon.com/easyallies. That is where you can go to support us. Everything that we do here is basically because of all of our fans who are pitching in there. That is the primary engine that funds this venture. There are other things that we do, but that is where most of our funding comes through. We are supported by you, and we have a lot of different rewards there. The biggest thing that most of the people watching this podcast should be aware of is at the $5 tier, you get 2 days early access, and you also get to submit questions to Love and Respect, as well as games and other things from time to time. You also get this podcast ad-free. And even if you're a $1 patron, you'll still get an ad-free version. You just won't get it available until Sunday. And there's a nice little RSS feed that's specific to patrons, so you can just get all of those things. Everything that we release audio form comes through that way. And then there's some higher tiers and stuff as well.
Hey, Blood, real quick before you move on, just want to say great job filling in at the last minute.
Yes.
For Jones.
Yeah. Round of applause.
Fantastic work, Bloodworth.
The highest level is the shout-out tier. And we have some wonderful people to give shout-outs to, and we'll just go right around the table. Shout-outs to Blue, Caleb Togi Crawford, Dave McKilligan, Edsger, So I'm a Spider, So What, El Thanis, Estocal, Greg the Dark Knight Kettering, and Nick. Shout out.
Shout out.
All right, to close out this show, Ben Moore, you get to promote any Easy Allies video you'd like to promote. You get the final word on anything that you've disagreed with, want to reiterate, or just popped into your head, and you get to sign off with your trademark sign off.
I want to promote the latest episode of Frame Trap 138. It's with Brad and Huber, and it's just a really good episode. I think you really feel like our enthusiasm, and I think it's expressed in a lot of ways. Like just hearing Huber talk about like the Streets of Rage 4 DLC, it's like the Final Fantasy VII remake came out again for the first time. It's like he just has such an enthusiasm for it that it's like he convinces you that it's the biggest release of the year, which is really fun to see. But then when we talk about things like XDefiant, we're very critical, but I think it comes across that we're critical because we care and we want things to be better. And so I think it's just a good episode of the show. Really gives you an idea of what that show is like at its best. What do I want to reiterate? Dead Space is back, motherfuckers. And Sophie is our supreme ruler. Attitude Era Easy A podcast. Japan got Shin Megami Tensei, and we got fucking Jelly Boy.